Spirit have to do with Job's ability to suffer well? Being an ancient believer, was his faith somehow different than ours? Those are two different questions. I'll answer both. I'll try to. The Holy Spirit had everything to do with Job's ability to suffer well. That's not one of the main teachings of the book. That's an inference that I draw from teachings elsewhere in the Bible. For example, in Romans 8, it says, the mind of the flesh is hostile to God. Romans 8:7. The mind of the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. And those who are in the flesh cannot please God. But you are not in the flesh. You are in the Spirit, if the Spirit of God really dwells in you. You got two kind of human beings. Those who are in the flesh and those who are in the Spirit. Period. In all of history. Before and after Pentecost. This is my theology of the Old Testament. The Holy Spirit is there, and wherever you find a genuine saint, he's got the Holy Spirit. He does not have the Holy Spirit in the sense that the Holy Spirit is there witnessing to the risen Christ, which is why John 7:39 says, the Spirit was not yet, because Jesus had not yet been raised. Remember that text? And a lot of people say, see, there was no Holy Spirit in the world before the resurrection, because it says that in John 7:39. I think it's 7:39. But I don't think it means that. I think it means the Holy Spirit was not, it doesn't even have a predicate nominative there. Holy Spirit was not, and I fill in, present witnessing to the risen Christ, because the Christ wasn't risen yet. The Old Testament saints did not have the Holy Spirit as a witness to Jesus, because he didn't witness to Jesus until Jesus came and was there to live and die and rise again to be witnessed to. And now the Holy Spirit's main job is in us, witnessing to the reality and the power and the beauty and the superior worth of Jesus Christ. But he was there. And some people say he was only there on believers. He came on believers, like he came on David, so that David would pray, take not the Holy Spirit from me. I don't think he was just on believers. He was in Caleb. Caleb had another spirit. That's why Caleb bore witness the way he did, unlike the other 10 spies who were so chicken-hearted. And he was bold because the Holy Spirit was in him. So, since it is impossible for the mind of the flesh to please God and to submit to God, and Job clearly did please God and submitted to God, therefore he doesn't have the mind of the flesh, he has the mind of the Spirit, which means, according to verse 9, he has the Holy Spirit. So that's my answer to question number one. The Holy Spirit was the means by which God preserved Job from completely sinking into unbelief. The second part of the question was, being an ancient believer, was his faith somehow different than ours? Yes and no. No, in that the nature of the soul experience of faith is faith, wherever it happens. It's the same. It's trust. It's reliance. It's being satisfied with... Now there's where the difference comes. They didn't know about Jesus. They didn't know about the cross. They didn't know about the atonement in fullness. Some of them had glimpses, like Isaiah 53. But by and large, what they trusted was the promises of God. That in ways they couldn't understand, their sin problem would be dealt with, and all things would work together for their good. And they had varying glimpses. You read different parts of the Old Testament, and you feel like, they didn't have a very clear picture there of the afterlife. And here they didn't have a clear picture of the resurrection, and so on. But others have greater glimpses. But what they had was, whatever revelation they had about God's reality and God's grace and God's work in the future, they believed it, they trusted it, they rested in it. They treasured Him. So it's the same as an experience. It's different in its content, in its knowledge. Let me take this opportunity to say something about the nature of faith, because this is just huge. Until you come to terms with how deep and rich and wide and great is the nature of saving faith, you will have a very hard time explaining why it is that justified sinners really do become sanctified by faith alone, instead of being justified by faith and then sanctified by works. And the reason we're not justified by faith alone and sanctified by works, the reason that's not the case, is because the faith that justifies is of such a nature that it kills sin. Not perfectly. And the way it kills sin is this. It first embraces Christ as a Redeemer, so that my conscience is cleansed, my future is secured, my guilt is taken away, an alien righteousness is imputed to me, the wrath of God is removed, and I am forever safe and secure without condemnation in Jesus. That's the beginning and the glory out of which we now live. But when the devil comes to you with some pornography or some quick buy-ins to the stock market, little sly or something, and he's going to tempt you with greed and covetousness and whatever. How does saving faith kill that? And it kills it because saving faith is a seeing Christ as supremely valuable. So that when you measure Christ and what you have in Him against what is being offered you by the devil, this is superior. That's what faith is. Faith trusts, embraces, receives, treasures Christ as more valuable than what the devil is offering you, which is why we fight the fight of faith every day of our lives. The way to fight to be a good person is not to get your list out, say, okay, 10 Commandments, God said do it, if I don't do it, I go to hell. Don't do that. The way to do it is to say, God, do I love you? Do I treasure you? Are you this precious to me? Which means that the fight against pornography, the fight against greed, the fight against fear, the fight against anger is mainly a fight to know God. It's mainly a fight to see Christ crucified as beautiful, which is why life totally changes when you get into this Christian hedonism motif, this Christian hedonism paradigm where the sin is defeated because you have promises that are superior to the promises of sin. And you cultivate a pure love of those promises. The reason we don't sin is because sin is such secondary, lousy, no-count payoff. And God is such huge, blue-chipped, high-yield payoff. We're hedonists through and through. And the essence of evil is my people have committed two great evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and have carved out for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. That's evil. Go to the fountain for your joy. Don't go to the devil and sin for your joy. Satan, how could he come into God's presence? Does he still come before God? Was God the one who sovereignly initiated Satan to come before Him in the first place? How should we view Satan's involvement in our own lives? A theology of Satan. And very good questions. See if I can give bullet answers to them. How could he come into God's presence? I assume you don't mean walking or flying. What you do mean is God is holy and He